Hi, and welcome to On the Shelves at ACPL. Today is February, and we are talking about Black History Month and nonfiction books for adults about Black history. So let's get started. My first choice is The Last Negroes at Harvard, the class of 1963 and the 18 young men who changed Harvard forever. It is by Kent Garrett and Jean Ellsworth. This is the story of 18 young men who were admitted to Harvard, began in the fall of 1959. At the time, they were called Negroes. By the time they graduated in 1963, they were called African Americans. So the story is personal about these 18 young men and what they went through to be admitted to Harvard, to go to classes, to survive perhaps some of the people who were not so welcoming to African American students at their university. But it also talks about the societal changes that went on between 1959 and 1963, the civil rights movement that led to the change between the term Negro to the term African American. My next choice is A Fool's Errand, Creating the National Museum of African American History and Culture in the Age of Bush, Obama, and Trump. It is by Lonnie G. Bunch III, who is the founding director of the museum, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. This is the newest Smithsonian Museum. It is on the National Mall, and it has gotten rave reviews. However, when he began in 2005, he had a staff of one and a budget promised to him by Congress, but no actual money in his hand. And the realization that even with what Congress gave him, he still needed to raise 2 times, 3 times more money to create a successful museum. This is partially a story, a history of the museum and how they developed their collections and how they curated what they wanted to display and share with the country and the world. It is also a personal story of the successes and struggles that he went through, and it's also a guide to leadership and to how you can succeed if you persevere and you keep the goal in mind and keep working toward it. My next choice is Overground Railroad, The Green Book and the Roots of Black Travel in America, and it is by Candacy Taylor. In the Jim Crow era and even beyond, if you were an African American and you were traveling across the country, let's say you were visiting relatives or you were moving across the country for a different job or different job opportunities, there were a lot of places that you could not stay. You were not welcome to eat at these restaurants. You were not welcome to stop at these gas stations. So African Americans began creating guides for fellow African Americans to let them know where they could stop along the way. This is extremely important, especially when you consider that there were towns called sundown towns, and if you were African American, you were not allowed to be in that town once the sun went down. So you really had to plan. I'm going to stop here and get some lunch. I'm going to stop here, and this hotel allows for black people to rent a room. So it is a fascinating part of our history that we may not know a lot about. I know that it's not something that I had known a whole lot about until fairly recently, and I think this book would be fascinating to read and to learn about the different places and the effect it had on their business, especially the white businesses that decided to cater to African Americans, and how did that affect their white usership. And my final choice is American Founders, How People of African Descent Established Freedom in the New World. It is by Christina Proenza-Coles. When we think about the founding of America, we tend to think about the white founders who signed the Declaration of Independence and were our first presidents and state leaders. However, people of African descent have been in the Americas since well before white settlers, and have always been involved in the fabric of our communities. They are sailors, they're artisans, they're slaves, they're freemen, they are everything that white people were in the United States or in the colonies before the United States was formed, and they made a difference and contributed to the fabric of society. So this book goes back and shares their stories and expands our horizons a little bit in knowing more about how people of African descent made a difference in our country. Those are my choices, but I'm sure you know we have many, many more. I want to point out that we have a display here and at the front of May Memorial if you would like to come in and look. Both fiction and nonfiction, both books for adults as well as children. So if you would like to put any of these on hold, you can go to our catalog at alancelibraries.org, or you can call any of our branches and we'll be happy to help you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on the shelves.